Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into some seriously creepy stuff today. The idea of a village of the hungry people.
Ooh, yeah, it's definitely giving off some major folk horror vibes, right?
Right, it sounds like something straight out of like an old, unsettling folktale.
Yeah. But finding an actual story with that exact title, it's been a challenge.
Yeah, I haven't been able to track anything down specifically called the Village of the Hungry People.
But the search has led us down some really interesting paths. Like, it's got me thinking about how that basic need for food, how it can become like twisted and horrifying, you know?
Exactly. And today we're going to look at some prime examples of that.
Yeah.
We've got Michael Katsu's The Hunger. We'll be talking about hungry ghosts and, of course, the legend of the Wendigo.
And each one of these examples kind of shows us how far people can be pushed, how fragile civilization really is, and what happens when those boundaries, the boundaries of what we consider human, what happens when those break down.
Ooh. Okay, so let's start with The Hunger. Now, this novel tackles the Donner Party tragedy, which is already a real-life horror story.
Right, like that's not even getting into the fictional stuff yet.
Exactly. So imagine being trapped in the Sierra Nevada mountains during winter in the 1840s. Resources dwindling, hope fading, and, survival gets pretty grim.
Katsu doesn't shy away from the historical accounts at all. I mean, there's starvation, cannibalism, all that really dark stuff that happened at the Donner Party.
Right, it's heavy stuff. But he weaves in this layer of supernatural dread on top of that, which makes you wonder what's real, what's not, and what happens when that line gets blurry.
It really messes with you, it gets under your skin.
Yeah, big time. It's like you can practically feel the cold, the hunger, the desperation closing in.
That's the real horror right there. It makes you think, what would you do in that situation? What choices would you make? How far would you go to survive?
It's like looking into the darkest parts of human nature and seeing something monstrous staring back.
Exactly. And that feeling, it sticks with you, even after you finish the book. Katsu just nails those primal fears, the fear of the unknown, losing control, and what we might be capable of when we're pushed to the edge.
Okay, so we've talked about a historical tragedy with a supernatural twist. Now let's dive into a realm where the supernatural is just. It's the main course, the world of hungry ghosts.
Right, so in Buddhist and Chinese traditions, hungry ghosts are these beings that are constantly tormented by hunger and thirst. They can never be satisfied. And it's all tied to their past deeds, greed, envy, attachment.
Ooh, karma's a hungry bitch, I guess.
It's rough, yeah. Like, imagine that feeling when you're absolutely starving and nothing can fill you up.
Been there. Late night fridge raids, you know the drill.
But now picture that magnified times 1,000 and lasting forever. That constant emptiness, the yearning that never ends. That's the reality for these hungry ghosts.
It's a scary thought. And the thing is, these beliefs, they actually play out in real-world rituals, like the Hungry Ghost Festival in Hong Kong.
Yeah, it's amazing. People make offerings, they perform ceremonies, all to appease these spirits. It's this blend of reverence and fear, recognizing their power and the need to keep them happy, so to speak.
It's like a cosmic protection racket.
Kind of, yeah. But it's also about compassion and generosity. Living a good life so you don't end up as one of those hungry ghosts yourself.
So not just spooky stories, but moral lessons woven right into the culture.
Exactly. Cautionary tales, reminding people to think about their actions.
It's like a cultural, check yourself before you wreck yourself, but with a side of supernatural terror.
Exactly. And speaking of terror, are you ready for the Wendigo?
I've been kind of dreading this one.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's do it. Hit me with all the chilling details.
All right, so the Wendigo, it comes from Algonquian folklore, and it represents greed, excess, and cannibalism. It's this gaunt, emaciated creature. It's practically all bones. And get this, the Wendigo grows bigger with every victim it devours. It becomes this grotesque reflection of its own hunger.
Oh, that's messed up. It's like the more it consumes, the more monstrous it gets.
Yeah, and it plays into that idea of unchecked desire, right? It's a warning against letting our appetites control us.
Absolutely. And it's not just a myth either. There's this thing called Wendigo psychosis, where people, often because of starvation, develop an actual craving for human flesh.
Right. It's a real phenomenon, as terrifying as that is.
Yeah, it's like the line between hunger and horror just completely vanishes in those cases.
There's a really tragic story about a Plains Cree trapper named Swift Runner. During a brutal winter in the late 1800s, he was facing starvation, and he ended up, killing and eating his family. It's a dark reminder of what people are capable of when they're pushed to the absolute limit.
God, that's awful. So it makes you wonder, is this village of the hungry people a real place? Or is it more like a state of mind? like a descent into this primal hunger that can consume anything, individuals, communities, even whole civilizations?
That's a great question. Maybe it's not a location, but a warning. A warning about what happens when we let greed take over, when we become slaves to our desires, and the monstrous consequences that can follow.
Okay, so far we've got historical tragedy with a supernatural twist, terrifying spirits driven by insatiable hunger, and a creature that embodies the worst of human desire. This deep dive is shaping up to be seriously creepy.
Yeah, and we've only scratched the surface. But what I find so interesting is that all these stories, they all come back to this core idea of hunger, both literal and metaphorical, and how it can drive us to do some pretty messed up things. It's like we're all living in a village of the hungry people, in a way.
Whoa, hold on. You're saying our modern world is like that, full of insatiable hunger.
Think about it. The constant ads, the pressure to keep up with the latest trends, the never-ending stream of news and social media. It's like we're always craving more, consuming more, but never truly satisfied.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It's like we're on this treadmill, always running, but getting nowhere.
Exactly, and you can see the consequences all around us. Environmental damage, inequality, political divisions, all fueled by this insatiable hunger for more.
So it's like a global Wendigo psychosis. We're all kind of turning into Wendigos.
In a metaphorical sense, yeah, it's like we've lost sight of what truly matters. We're so focused on consuming that we forget about connection, about compassion.
Okay, so that's pretty bleak. But what can we do about it? Can we break free from this cycle?
It starts with awareness, recognizing our own hunger, figuring out what drives us, what we really crave, and whether those cravings are actually good for us or if they're just leading us down a destructive path.
So being mindful of our choices. Every purchase, every click, every action contributes to this whole system.
Exactly. It's about shifting our focus from more to enough, from external validation to internal fulfillment.
Easier said than done, right? I mean, we're practically programmed to want more. It's like fighting against our own nature.
It's a challenge, for sure, but not impossible.
Remember the Hungry Ghost Festival. It's not about denying hunger altogether. It's about finding ways to appease it, to redirect those cravings in a positive way.
So instead of mindlessly consuming everything that's thrown at us, we need to be more intentional about what we feed ourselves, both physically and mentally. Precisely. Cultivating gratitude, appreciating experiences over material possessions, and finding fulfillment in things like creativity and connection.
It's like nourishing ourselves with something more than just empty calories. You know, something that actually sustains us on a deeper level.
And speaking of nourishment, or rather the lack of it, let's go back to those hungry ghosts. But this time through a more historical lens. The series Gyeongsong Creature.
The South Korean show, set in 1945 during the Japanese occupation, it really brings the horror of hunger to life.
Oh yeah, it's brutal. The show doesn't hold back. It shows the suffering, the deprivation that the Korean people went through.
Food was scarce, resources were plundered. It was just a really dark time.
And then into this already horrific situation, you have this terrifying creature. It's born from these awful experiments and driven by this insatiable hunger.
It's like a monster that mirrors the desperation and hunger of the people around it.
Right. And the creature specifically craves human spinal fluid. It's gruesome, but it also symbolizes the way the Korean people were being exploited and dehumanized.
So it's not just about physical hunger. It's about a hunger for freedom, for justice, for basic human dignity.
Exactly. And the setting of Gyeongsong, with its sharp divide between the rich and the poor, it really reinforces that idea of a society fractured by hunger and inequality.
The impoverished South Village in the show, it's like a literal village of the hungry people, yearning for something more.
And there's this interesting detail about the creature's origin. It was infected by a parasite from the ocean, which ended up destroying a whole village.
Whoa, you think that could be another reference to the village of the hungry people?
Yeah.
A community destroyed by this force that leaves everyone hungry in its wake.
It's possible. It suggests that this concept of a village of the hungry people, it's not limited to one specific place or time. It can emerge anywhere. Hunger becomes a driving force. It can twist people and societies into something monstrous.
So we've got this creature embodying the horrors of colonialism and the desperate hunger of a nation. But we also have this tie-in to the village of the hungry people. It's like we're seeing this pattern, this recurring theme of hunger as this destructive force that can really mess things up.
And it reminds us that hunger, in all its forms, for food, power, recognition, can be incredibly powerful. It can drive us to do things we never thought possible.
All right, so we've explored the dark side of hunger in history, in folklore, even in a contemporary horror series. Now let's shift gears a bit and look at a more ritualistic, almost celebratory approach to these themes. The Hungry Ghost Festival.
Yeah, especially the way it's celebrated in Hong Kong. It's a fascinating look at how cultures deal with the idea of insatiable hunger and these restless spirits that are said to walk among us.
And guess what? There's a village right at the center of it all.
In the Yuen Long village of Tai Kung Po, they have this 3-day celebration for the Hungry Ghost Festival. They build this massive figure called Da Shi out of bamboo and paper. It's like 5 meters tall.
Whoa. What is that, like 16 feet tall?
Yeah, something like that. It's supposed to represent the king of ghosts.
So it's like a giant scarecrow, but for ghosts.
Basically, it's about showing respect, but also fear. Recognizing the power of these spirits and the need to keep them happy.
And they have all these rituals, right? Feasts, burning effigies, even leaving empty seats at shows.
Yeah, it's all about appeasing the hungry ghosts and ensuring good fortune. It's incredible how these beliefs are so ingrained in the culture.
It's like they're acknowledging this village of the hungry people in the afterlife.
Yeah.
And they're trying to maintain some sort of peace with it.
Exactly. And maybe there's a lesson for us in that. A reminder that our actions have consequences, not just in this life, but maybe even beyond.
Yeah, it's like we got to be careful what we feed ourselves, not just with food, but with everything.
It all goes back to that fear of losing control, right?
Oh, that's it.
Being consumed by something bigger than us. And you can really see that in how these creatures are described.
Like the Wendigo. It's all bones, gaunt. It's like the embodiment of starvation and greed, all wrapped up in one.
Exactly. And the hungry ghost with those long necks and bottomless stomachs, it's a visual representation of that insatiable hunger.
Like a warning sign, right? Don't let this be you.
Yeah. And I think these stories really tap into some of humanity's oldest fears. Darkness, scarcity, the unknown. We've always been afraid of these things.
But maybe by facing them, through these stories and rituals, we can actually start to deal with them.
Maybe we can even learn to control them instead of being controlled by them.
Right, because if this village of the hungry people isn't a real place, then maybe it's more like a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
A warning about what happens when we let our hunger run wild.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that we got to be mindful of what we're consuming and what's consuming us.
You know, it's funny, we started out looking for this specific story, the village of the hungry people.
And we never actually found it.
But we found so much more along the way. All these fascinating stories and ideas.
That's the cool thing about exploring these themes. You never know what you're going to uncover.
So, listeners, as you go back to your daily lives, remember those Wendigo warnings, those chilling, hungry ghost stories. Remember the Donner Party and what happened in Gangsung.
Let those stories be a reminder to really think about what you're hungry for and what truly nourishes you.
Find satisfaction in a way that benefits everyone, not just yourself.
Because that's how we stay out of the village of the hungry people.
That's it for this deep dive. Stay curious, stay informed, and keep those appetites in check.